There's more to the Trayvon Martin case for our roundtable. Here today are Judith Browne Dianis, co-director of the Advancement Project, an action tank, not a think tank, as she said. Dr. Chris Metzler, a political scientist at Georgetown University. April Ryan, White House correspondent for American Urban Radio Networks. And Michelle Bernard, president and CEO of the Bernard Center. Folks, welcome back to the show.
Thank you.
You know, it's interesting. I'm always wearing suits and ties on the show, and it was really amazing this week when you saw in New York and you saw in Philadelphia, and you saw folks all around the country who are saying wear hoodies for Trayvon Martin. And this story to me is far different than some of these other social justice stories that we've seen, where literally you are seeing vigils and events in 40, 50 cities across America, even other parts of the world. What makes this different?
Because when you look at this young man, this is not a child who was engaged in bad behavior. He could be anyone's son. If you think about some of the photos we've seen of him in his football uniform, or even in the hoodie, he was a young, sweet child, and his life was taken from him. And there's not one parent in the country who can look at that picture and not say, but for the grace of God, that could have been my own son.
Yeah.
Right, it's an issue that speaks to everybody, and it's a teachable moment, right? We got to use this moment to actually capitalize on the fact that racial profiling happens. And Trayvon was one person who was a victim of it, and that we can't allow it to happen any longer. Wearing a hood, that's not what it's about. It's about a young black male.
As I said to the panel before, I also think that what resonated in this case was just the absolute ineptness of the Sanford Police Department, because we all know the conversation that we have with young black men in terms of how to act, how to do a certain thing,
what not to wear.
What not to wear. But when you literally sit here and see, you know, didn't take the clothes, let him have the gun back, wasn't arrested, bought the self-defense, didn't check Trayvon's cell phone. You're sitting here going, how in the world is that justice when you couldn't even do a basic investigation?
And that's the problem. So as a former prosecutor, a couple of things really came to mind. Number one, how do you simply buy a defense that someone, a potential criminal, has put in place? We've never done that. For the police department to say that they have looked at the law and they have no probable cause to arrest Zimmerman is absolutely legally incorrect. Look, if I walk down the street and I look suspicious, that's probable cause enough for the police to arrest me. And as you look at this whole kind of thing in terms of this self-defense, he is going to have to prove that self-defense. That doesn't mean that he's not arrested. So what it says to us is that there is this ineptness. There is this kind of desire to take the word. And the fact that you test the victim for drugs and you don't test the alleged perpetrator. And finally, he is not even entitled to that defense under the law. The law is absolutely clear. If you are the pursuer, you are not entitled to that defense. The 911 tape says it.
April, I want April. This is very interesting, and I want to go to you on this because being with American Urban Radio Networks, black media drove this.
Yes,
absolutely.
Yes.
I mean, let's just be real clear. I mean, on the local level, the Orlando Sentinel, they've been covering it. Tremaine Lee, who is a writer for BlackVoices.com, he has been on this. And when black media folks begin to drive this on social media, we forced mainstream media to wake up and do something, because otherwise they were ignoring it and they were being quiet about it.
And it's not just the fact that black media drove it. We have all these stories that we get all the time, but it's the way the story happened. We know that this young man had Skittles. He was walking to his father's girlfriend's home. He was innocent, unarmed. And we hear the 911 tapes. The evidence is resounding. What happened, and it helped black media put this out there, and white media, mainstream media said, look, my God, this is a real big deal. So it just kept snowballing and snowballing. So now George Zimmerman is basically an O.J. Simpson. He is in his own jail no matter what happens.
A lot of people got upset at me when I talked about the need for President Barack Obama to say something about this. People said it's a local matter. He shouldn't. They brought up the whole Henry Louis Skip Gates deal. And I said, no. I said, I believe there's something broader here that you can actually say. And again, it was a lot of pushback, and it's very interesting. African Americans were demanding so many other people stand up, but then got protective of the president. Friday, when he announced the appointment to the World Bank, the president did take a question and spoke to this, and this is what he said.
I'm the head of the executive branch, and the Attorney General reports to me, so I've got to be careful about my statements to make sure that we're not impairing any investigation that's taking place right now. But obviously, this is a tragedy. I can only imagine what these parents are going through. And when I think about this boy, I think about my own kids. And I think every parent in America should be able to understand why it is absolutely imperative that we investigate every aspect of this, and that everybody pulls together, federal, state, and local, to figure out exactly how this tragedy happened. So I'm glad that not only is the Justice Department looking into it, I understand now that the governor of the state of Florida has formed a task force to investigate what's taking place. I think all of us have to do some soul searching to figure out how does something like this happen. And that means that we examine the laws and the context for what happened, as well as the specifics of the incident. But my main message is to the parents of Trayvon Martin. You know, if I had a son, he'd look like Trayvon. And, you know, I think they are right to expect that all of us as Americans are going to take this with the seriousness it deserves, and that we're going to get to the bottom of exactly what happened.
Do you think that now that the president has spoken, that this is now also going to force the Republican candidates have to address this issue, because they've been very silent?
As a matter of fact, I wrote a piece last week for the Hill that literally was called Trayvon Martin and the Republican Contenders. And one of the things that I said in the article was, in light of the fact that we had the Illinois primary, that Illinois was the spiritual home of both Barack Obama and Abraham Lincoln, how is it that not one of the Republican contenders for the presidency of the United States didn't see it fit to utter one word about what is the biggest international news story that has hit the area in a very, very long time? This child was murdered, and not one of them said a word about it.
Michelle, first of all, you know just as well as I do, many of these candidates are not catering to the certain group that the Trayvon Martin story caters to.
But they will.
Go ahead and say it, black folks.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, black. And we
This is a black show.
But we're also seeing it in the polls. All these primaries, the black numbers are so low that they can't be measured for those candidates. So they're not worrying about necessarily.
But here's the greater point. I don't care if you want to be president of the United States
and of the whole country.
You want, no, 1 second, April. And you want to represent the entire country. You should have the guts and the courage to stand there.
I'm not justifying what they're doing.
And if you stand there and call yourselves pro-life, you should care about this boy's life.
The problem is,
the
problem is that the Republican Party has been behind backing the laws that are the stand your ground laws. Alec, the American Legislative Exchange Council was the architect of this. After it passed in Florida, they went and took it to other states and passed it. That's right. And so they're in a little bit of a bind to come out and say that this is a problem, because the NRA is not going to go for it.
This is the point I want. One other point I want to make. In the piece I did, we had people writing in saying Michelle Bernard made a mistake. George Zimmerman is not white. He is Hispanic, and we cleared it up. Hispanic is an ethnicity. It is not a race. Hispanics self-identify as white, black, Asian, a whole lot of other things. But what will be interesting, though, given if you put together the immigration laws that we've seen in Arizona, Alabama, Georgia, all over the country that basically allow for racial profiling, the Republicans, this election is going to come down to demographics. Republicans might start saying something because George Zimmerman's parents are not saying he's not white, he's Hispanic, and Republicans need that Hispanic vote. So maybe they will magically now decide to say something.
Roland, as you know, really fast, and going back
15 seconds.
Going back to about President Obama, he was very strategic in his statements, and the administration had been working all week. I mean, I even got calls early in the week asking me, what do you think about Trayvon Martin? So they had been trying to strategically plan how the president was going to deliver it, and it was delivered right in his lap Friday in a question, and he answered it strategically. He did not make the same mistakes that he did with the Henry Louis Gates issue at that press conference when asked the question. He was straight, strategic, no emotion.
Actually, there was some emotion that some folks I've talked to, but I will say this. At the end of the day, I think they had no choice to say something because this story has gone
viral
in such a huge way that it has gone beyond being a local story. It is a much larger piece, and we're going to be hearing about this for a long time. And I do think that this may have a different impact, I think, than Gina 6. I really believe that.
It will. I agree.
Folks, I certainly appreciate it. Thanks so much.